So, hi everyone. I'm Danica Sapit. I'm going to be talking about STEAM, which is the STEM fields combined with the arts. Pretty broad topic, but I think it's something that obviously resonates with the people of this conference. And I'm going to focus specifically on the student organization that I created back in my university years, which was only 2 years ago. And STEAM, you may have heard of it as an education initiative that is popular for K through 12, but I wanted to focus specifically on what is the value there for the collegiate level and what opportunities can we open up there. And just like Jennifer was saying, something a little different. I'm actually by trade not someone in the sciences or the arts. I studied electrical and computer engineering with a minor in illustration at Rutgers University, and also took a user experience and interaction design course. That's me with my capstone. I made a neural net for if you took a picture of a 2D drawing or handwritten text, it would convert it into its digital equivalent, so like a 3D model or a written document. I'm sorry, not a written document, a digital document. And today I'm a team lead and software engineer at Adobe. So I basically work on the technology that enables creatives to do work, specifically for Behance, Adobe Portfolio, and Adobe Live Streaming. And as a team lead, I get to work with the engineers and the various researchers about what are the product needs and product opportunities that we can have moving forward. So in my personal creative expression, though, there are two methodologies that I like to employ. One is kind of just doing what I do at work, which is creating tech to allow artists to do whatever it is that they want to do and however they want to express themselves. That's a tool that I made for allowing people to create virtual spaces. So this person created a virtual museum, but lately we've been working with mural artists so that they could take their street art into different locations throughout the world. And also now we've been working with neuroscientists so that you could explore the brain like it's an apartment or something. But the one that I'm more interested in, the methodology that I'm more interested in is, I like to call it symbiotic, because I like to basically allow things that I learn to inspire a theme for art, and in the inverse relationship, allow an artistic theme that I'm exploring to make me delve into learning about something. So for example, I was learning about memory allocation in the computer, and at the same time learning about memory consolidation because my friend had gone through a coma, and she was recently, regaining her memory, so I wanted to learn more about the memory process. So as I was learning about memory allocation in the CPU and how data isn't necessarily deleted when you delete a file on your computer, it's just stored in memory for a while until it is replaced. It's very similar to memory consolidation. And in this artistic piece I made here, I was actually taking different parts of the image, taking it in its TIFF format, and then programmatically replacing parts of it to emulate like memory. A recent thing that I've been doing is exploring color, because I took a lot of pictures at the Color Factory in New York City, and it made me want to explore what is color, at its scientific level. So right now I'm working on this interactive illustration where you're playing with these light particles that represent like the different wavelengths and color channels, and the illustration reacts in response to how you're interacting with those light particles. You can also see that her expression is changing, so there's also the cultural context of colors there, and that's kind of exploring the relationship between how do we perceive color and also what is the underlying relationship there. So I've always been interested in that like methodology of learning about something. Back when I was in high school, I loved Gustav Klimt. He was my favorite secession artist. And I'd learned that a lot of his inspiration for these ornate details in his work were actually inspired by the meetings that he got to go to for the Viennese intelligentsia for evolutionary and biological research innovations. So a lot of the decorative pieces in his art are actually inspired by cells. And that's how he explored the theme of like creation, of birth, of life. And also learning that Einstein was inspired by science fiction novels for his theory of relativity. Like, I was like, there's something here. There's something about taking all these different fields and using them as mediums to explore something new and maybe create something new. So in my first year in college, I didn't think I was going to go into technology. I also thought, I was a bit of a Luddite. I was like, I don't want the AI to control my life or anything like that, even though my capstone ended up being an AI. But I wanted to explore creating this mood ring. And I learned about thermotropic crystals and photothermograms, which are the things that smartphones use to like measure blood pressure under the surface of your skin by measuring changes in light absorption by taking different pictures of how blood pressure changes. Taking different pictures of your skin and then comparing how the light absorption changes there to get a sense of like your anxiety levels or things like that. So disconnected from this project here is a small camera where people would place their fingers and it would be able to show their mood using a PLA printed little figure here. And it would show the color based on what a thermotropic crystal color would be around the heat level of your finger. So I was exploring those things and I was like, there's something here and I want to be able to find a network of people that maybe are also thinking about this. So when I was working on my school newspaper, they allowed me to explore what are the different ways, and are there different ways that my current university is exploring the intersection of the arts and sciences. And little did they know that that became the impetus of me starting a student organization at the school. So that's a very blurry picture, but something that I learned in my research was that there was currently a very small school network just localized to RISD and Brown for STEAM. And they were a university initiative that was inspired by Barack Obama's 2011 State of the Union address, talking about how we need to be teaching more students STEM skills, and then catching up in the STEM jobs and innovation races. And their idea was that by adding the arts, creativity is the element that we're missing here. Creativity is the element for innovation, and creativity is the element that will allow us to make it more accessible to students and to catch up to get more people from marginalized groups into the field, et cetera. So yeah, at the time it was just RISD and Brown, and now we have a whole coalition of schools that are with us. So I was like, that's awesome. That's exactly what I want to do, and I wish it was at my university. From working on the newspaper article, I found that there were already students that were working on things. That's an illustration from one of the founding members with me on, her understanding of different abstract math concepts. This is someone who was experimenting with microbial art. And there were a lot of university professors that were already doing research in that interdisciplinary area. And it was just something that I wanted to do. And the more that I talked to different students, the more that they felt similarly, that they felt siloed in their different disciplines because we were schools that were divided by our majors. And we wanted more opportunity for, exploration. So I worked with the RISD and Brown School to start a STEAM school starter kit in 5 easy steps and then employed it myself. What exactly did my university section do? And one of the things that we did was we divided into different committees. These were student-led, and the point was that these allowed students to kind of go after things that they were intrinsically motivated to learn about. And because of different majors, people had different specific interests in each of the different STEM fields. STEAM X Science, that's an example of a biomimic design workshop that they led. All of the workshops were led by our students, so it was an opportunity for those students to teach, what they were exploring in their head, to learn about a different field that they were interested in, and also to interface with different professors and experts in their field and to bring them in. STEAM X Tech, we had a music technology event. STEAM X Math, we had music visualization. And STEAM X Society, we had a lot of outreach. We had a lot of outreach events, which I'll talk about a little bit more after. So we also brought in a bunch of different speakers. We had, a lot of these were already at Rutgers University, which was great because it was an opportunity for us to, showcased that there were people doing similar work already in the university, and they didn't necessarily have any other venue besides research conventions that were extremely specialized to show it to students who would be interested in being part of this research. So Babak Saleh was working on an AI that was kind of quantifying creativity by looking at artists, and seeing the different effects that they had throughout their different movements. We had Pixar come in and talk about computer animation and technology. Julia Buntain is an incredible scientific artist, especially with neurological art. Peter Kahn, I'll talk about him in a bit, but he was a biology professor who kind of, in the 90s, created a coloring book about proteins and the different creatures to represent those proteins and enzymes. And Bahman Kalantari, who was also our faculty advisor, created this program which is visualizing finding the root of polynomials. So that image there is actually the result of his program, finding the root of a simple 4-degree polynomial. We also had outreach and collaboration, like I said. We had tech meetups. We did Maker Day things. We founded a makerspace at my university so that we could create a bioprinter. So a bunch of students from different fields took apart this old 3D printer so that we could make it a bioprinter, make a small biolab in our university, print different food items or different things for scientific experiments. We had panels, which I think was the first time actually that I met Amanda of Scientific Illustration, now that I remember. And we also had STEMnet Colloquium, which was an education initiative with some of the professors in the school asking the question, how can we transform this cutting edge research into a form that is accessible and fun for children, which I'll talk about in a bit. University-wide initiatives. We also were able to get an innovator in residence, so we had an artist come to the school, live with us in the honors college, and continue her creative practice. It was Julia Buntain. And we got a winter session course, which meant that we now had a course in the curriculum that could be counted for credit about the interdisciplinary opportunities that are out there. And so students could be exposed to different things, just like this conference is allowing us to do, and to have different conversations there. And a STEAM Women's Empowerment Conference, which was a great time. It was just about highlighting the different opportunities and things that we've done, and kind of making it more accessible to not only women but all marginalized groups who are often not very represented in STEM fields. And the last thing that we did was that we showcased people telling their stories. There are different stories or things that people wanted to highlight about work that they were doing. So we created a catalog, we created a medium, and we did student showcases. So there's that same student with her mathematical art there. And this enabled people, to feel like there was a place for those thoughts and there was a place for opening those conversations. So when I'm analyzing the value of STEAM, what are some guiding questions that I have at the level of what were we trying to accomplish with STEAM as an ideology? What value, what informational power in STEM can we expose and leverage with visuals, with each of the arts? And then as an organization, what does this enable us to showcase and do? So going back, here's what I feel was the significance to educators, going back to the colloquium. Here was the session that we had with Professor Peter Kahn and his protein coloring book. Here's his cellulase chomper. We also then, taking this idle idea that he had in the 90s, brought his coloring book to this elementary school, where students were then now learning about enzymes. And then as they learned about different enzymes, all they got were that molecular structure, and then they drew on top of it based on what they were now learning about the enzyme to help them remember what that enzyme did. So some made a hedgehog, they made a mango, different things like that, because it's an enzyme that's found in fruits. So, it was it wasn't just making something that looked cool for children, it was something about getting them to actually synthesize and process these complex ideas in an extremely fast and accessible way. And it's just fun to look at that little guy. Another cool thing that we did was at a makerspace, at a Maker Day, which was at a public library. This team member was working on entomology research, where she was looking at a local beetle species, and she tagged them with this UV dye so that she could observe their migratory patterns. And we thought, why don't we let kids do that? So we got a bunch of installation artist students in the school and used the actual UV dye from that entomology research. And we created this forest space in this empty room in a library. And then we tagged the dyes with like the UV thing, the UV dye. We tagged the beetles with the UV dye and then placed them around the room and gave them hints about, what they're doing in their environment, things like that. The students came into a lit room. We gave them different tools. We told them about the situation, like they're tagged with this UV dye, which of these different tools would you use to kind of investigate and find the beetles? And it became a scavenger hunt for them. And then kids are so intelligent, they immediately went for the UV flashlight. Because they were magnifying glasses, they were very traditional, exploratory things, but like it just goes to show like that's exactly what a researcher would be doing. Like, what's the best tool for us to do the job? What different things can we glean from what we're observing here, and what conclusions can we make? So then after we asked them, what kind of things could you, what creatures did you find? What did you observe about the beetles, et cetera? And they were making scientific reports, but like at a K-12 level. And these are like 6-year-old students who were exploring this space. And now I think it's almost a public installation piece at the library. So now that's like a form of profit for the installation artists. And that's like something that the installation art students can put on their resume that they can be proud of. And it was just beautiful. There's a significance to significance to society, that's a tongue twister, about adding cultural context to innovation. So as a result of some of the speakers that we brought in, there were different nonprofit groups that approached students about creating tech for social good projects, and it also inspired a bunch of senior theses. One such example was like, how can we use AR art to do activism? And another one was about someone was in a creative nonfiction class, and they had, the approach in creative nonfiction is that you kind of write about an observation that you have, talk about what interests you about it, and then just see where your thoughts lead you to and what conclusion you have. So it's very not like the scientific approach, but that format allowed her to, as she looked at a spray painted gin, go from that prompt, that impetus, and became the impetus and format for a senior thesis project on art therapy and neuroscience. This is a cool one. One of our STEAM students, Ingrid Paredes, inspired by the value that visual arts have on communicating and scientific communication in general, she founded the March for Science. So that's currently an initiative that has been working with the UN about how can we make scientific exposure something that the public consciousness is aware of, that people appreciate scientific literacy, and that they care about things like climate change policy. And then 2 different speakers that we had, Ramzi Nasser created a programming language using Arabic characters, to talk about the underlying cultural biases of having a Latin alphabet programming language. Neil Harbison was a man who was colorblind, so he implanted an antenna in his head so that he could see color. See sound. No, so that he could hear color. That's what it was. So he has the most incredible, vibrant, colorful pieces. He's an artist by practice, and he also created the Cyborg Foundation to help people with different disabilities augment their lives with technology. Significance to students. So as I was talking about this, it's about forming an ideology and creating opportunities for them to teach, what they're thinking about. That LinkedIn screenshot is an example of a student who reached out to me after I graduated and how she had this idea after an augmented reality workshop that we were doing to create a tutoring business for helping with chemistry by using AR cards to make it easier to understand molecular structures. Very similar to how we're creating a virtual space for the brain. It just is a lot easier to process information that is visual and that is a space that you can navigate. And it was just a newfound way of having these flashcards. And she was not traditionally in STEM. She was purely a visual artist, but she became extremely interested in how can we expand the number of people who feel that they can learn about science. This slide is a little different, but I just wanted to talk about, since I'm no longer in university, how has it affected, my time at work? And something I fully appreciate about my team at Adobe is that a lot of our core engineers are not traditional engineers. They did not come from traditional tech backgrounds. A lot of them are artists. A lot of them are musicians. A lot of them are neuroscientists. And yet they're the best engineers on the team. And what that allows us to do is kind of think about technology in a different way. Like a lot of the time, thinking in abstractions is instinctive for them because it's a series of rules for physical objects interacting in visual space. It allows us to be more product-minded. It allows us to be more communicative and empathetic to the user. And it makes it so that we're really passionate about the work that we do because we're serving people that are like us. There's that panel where the year after I graduated, the STEAM team brought in a bunch of professionals who are working in interdisciplinary fields to talk about how it has affected their life. How do they bring it to their work, and how do they, what advice can they give for finding a community of resources and allowing people to find exactly the right field that they want to get into, whether or not that's a traditional field. In the top one, Adobe sponsored me to go to a hackathon at the Museum of Natural History. And this is one particular case that was interesting, where there was a curator who had scientific data on 2D slices of meteors. And in those 2D slices of meteorites, a scientist was able to identify that there are these frozen magnesium silicate balls called chondrules that can give information about their age, their chemical composition, et cetera. So we should segment them. And this animator / graphics, this video graphics designer was like, if only I could see them in 3D space. And at first, the scientists wanted to use computer vision to kind of segment out those chondrules to have the machine just look at the 2D image and look for things that look like circles. But because that graphics and animator was already looking in the space of converting 2D images to 3D maps, they were able to make a 3D relief of the entire meteorite and then immediately find the chondrules in the form. And not only that, but also print out the meteorite and use it for educational resources after. And that wouldn't have happened if those kinds of people weren't able to interact in the first place. So this kind of just summarizes things that I've been saying. What I really like about STEAM, yes, it's an education initiative, but I like to think of it as a methodology. I like the idea that knowledge is universal and adaptive. You can't say that this isn't for me, because if you start to think of each of the different fields as a material for something, you can start to put different facets of knowledge together in different ways, which allows you to come up with new ideas, which allows you to be interested in different areas, and which allows for more conversation to be had. And once you start talking to people in different fields, you start to fill in missing connections, which enable you to create new projects. A lot of the time it was like finding a designer for something that an engineer had an idea for, or vice versa. You get to have exposure to different things that are non-traditional, like residencies, like scientific illustrations that aren't offered at my school. people now have gone into industrial design, scientific illustration after school because they were able to understand that it's a field that exists through the student organization. And these are just like examples of like news articles that were written about my club, and some, I guess, excerpts about the statistical value of having arts with your STEM education. And from our outreach project, we were able to find that the elementary schools, just in like the 4 years that we were in place, the enrollment in STEM and arts concentrations in high school and then in college and beyond increased. It was a slight increase, it was only like a 2% increase, but like that's tangible. So STEAM, again, is broad. It's STEM with the arts. And that was the whole theme of our 6th catalog, which we helped design, the idea being that here's the 5-sided pentagon representing each of the fields, but it's up to you to define it for yourself and to have it be what you make of it. And yeah, I can't, the interest is niche, but I like that it seemed like the opposite of being insular. I like that it allowed people to have a love for creation, to be intrinsically motivated to learn, and thus to consolidate that knowledge better. And as people have been saying throughout this entire day, it opens doors for many to be able to, and to begin to desire to understand the relevance and opportunity for various fields. I put here, like a lot of good forms of art, it's not the work of a single artist, it's a work of negotiation, and you found mutual appreciation. It engages both your left brain and right brain because we have a whole brain. And that kind of thinking is really the heart of being innovative and being, inventive. And that's the end of my slides.